And so, and I know that's what I was saying. Yeah, and that's it. I mean, it's a great story. We were just covering last week when we covered the background of Philemon, the kind of man he was, which is very, very important. Okay, Paul greeted not only Philemon but some other brethren that were there that we mentioned that were noticed in that list of characters, and also he addressed the brethren that were meeting in the church in his home. He opened his home for them. And of course, all these positive things about Philemon, which is very important. That'll play a role in our discussion today. And so last week we covered 1 through 7 of noticing the things that we talked about in the previous slide. And we were just dealing with his duties. Now, we already read this, so we're not going to go back and read it again. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to back up to verse 8 and bring us up to verse 11, through verse 11, which we finished last week. And then we'll just continue on with our verse by verse and get through this book today. Just notice some of the things that Paul was telling Philemon, which is really important for us to learn today, especially when we talk about brethren relations and how to get along with one another. And you have to appreciate that. And so in verse 8, Paul said, therefore, after going through all those positive things about Philemon and wanting him to continue on and how you refreshed us and we've heard about your faith and your godliness and just a lot of wonderful things, he says, therefore, though I might be very bold in Christ to command you what is fitting, yet for love's sake I rather appeal to you, being such a one as Paul the aged, and now also a prisoner of Jesus Christ, which we talked about last week. I appeal to you for my son Onesimus, whom I have begotten in my chains, who once was unprofitable to you, but now is profitable to you and to me. So, we just finished up talking about that. Telling Paul about Onesimus and sending him back to you. He was unprofitable to you, Philemon, but now he's going to be profitable to you. Why? Why? Now he's a Christian. Now he's a Christian. Do you think about it? You got a job? You're not a Christian? Somebody teaches you the truth, you become a Christian. Is that good or bad for your employer? It's good news, right? It's good news. I mean, hopefully you were a good worker prior to that, but I'm going to tell you something. Now that you become a Christian, and if your boss finds out, hey, I heard you became a Christian, and he's a little concerned about that, he shouldn't be concerned about that at all. Matter of fact, he should be relieved and be happy. Of course, he doesn't know all this stuff unless he's a Christian himself. So I just want us to think about that with you and I, about how that becoming a Christian, it changes us. And in other words, people are going to be the beneficiaries. Think about that. You became a Christian, why?
To be a servant.
Yeah, but mainly you became a Christian because
somebody taught
you. Yeah, you wanted to go to heaven. Okay. You wanted your sins gone. It was about you, right? It was about me. I mean, I became a Christian because of my relationship with the Lord was in jeopardy. But the thing is, when I became a Christian, when you became a Christian, who are the beneficiaries of that were everybody that knows you. Think about that. You're a Christian. Everybody that knows you are going to benefit from the fact that you're a Christian. So the question is, are they benefiting? The people that you know, are they thankful that you're a Christian? Just some good thought-provoking stuff here. And as I'm going through these verse by verse now, guys, you got comments. As you all know, just jump in. Now let's pick up where we left off. So, he says in verse 12, he says to Philemon, I am sending him back. You therefore receive him, that is my own heart, whom I wish to keep with me, that on your behalf he might minister to me in my chains for the gospel. And I'll just read one more verse. But without your consent, I wanted to do nothing, that your good deed might not be compulsion, as it were, but voluntary. Now, there's a lot in those 3 verses. Now, when you read that, what is it that Paul did as far as the points that he was trying to get across to Philemon here? Other than just the obvious, but go ahead.
Let Philemon make the decision of what he needs to do. Onesimus is his slave, right?
Right.
If he wants him to go back to Paul, it's his call. It's not Paul saying, hey, you send it back to me, I need him here, or I'm just sending this letter, he needs to stay here. He's your employee, right? You should determine where he should go. But as a brother, you're going to treat him the right way regardless. So that's kind of what.
And hopefully. So how was Paul, in those few verses, how was Paul treating Philemon? Respect. Let's get that, right? I mean, not only did he say earlier that we discussed last week, I don't really want to come across like commanding you to do this. I kind of want you to do this voluntarily. Demonstrate that love that is there, and you have to respect that. But here he says that, and he's also telling Philemon what he really wanted, though. It's one thing, I'm sending him back to you, but what did he convey to Philemon, right?
That he really needed him and that he was very helpful to him, but he wasn't his to keep.
Right. So not only was it helpful to him, there's something else in there that he's getting across. He's very helpful to me, but there was another compliment in here. What was it that Paul was acknowledging in those 3 verses?
He needed his approval.
Not only did he need his approval, but did you catch where he said, whom, in verse 13, whom I wish to keep with me, that on your behalf he might minister to me in my chains for the gospel. In other words, it would be a credit to him. It would be, again, a credit to Philemon in doing this. And again, it's helping us to acknowledge that the things that we do are good for us. Okay, I become a Christian. Okay, so Chuck, you have a proper attitude towards them. So they're going to benefit from that. Well, that's good. So they're recipients of it. But the fact that they're recipients of the way you're acting, don't separate it from the fact that you're doing good. Tim?
Well, I think to that point that it causes Philemon to say, okay, now what do I need it for? And here's what I would use it for. What does Paul need it for? Right? And then he can make that decision on himself to say, okay, for me, the best thing for me to do as his employer is to send him there. He's more needed there. Just like us. We have the opportunity to do 2 things. We should weigh which one is the more beneficial for the cause of Christ. Right? And that's what we should do. And because that means on our behalf, we're really sacrificing. I need you to do this, but you need to do that. And that's, I think, important.
Okay, that does play into this. Trey, what are you going to say?
Well, and Philemon didn't even know that he was there.
Right.
I mean, Paul could have he did the right thing, but Paul could have just left him as he was, ministering to him and helping him with the gospel, but it wasn't the right thing, even though Philemon didn't know.
And did you guys also see within this, which we deal with all the time on a personal basis, do you see Paul respecting opinions in here? Do you see where he's respecting Paul, or Paul's respecting Philemon's free will to decide whatever he wants, right? There's not that dictator, my way or the highway kind of idea. And I think that really comes across in this letter of Paul wanting to help this whole situation and helping. And again, let's not forget, he's trying to smooth things over, right? I mean, Tim?
Well, and the other thing, we're not thinking about Philemon. Onesimus. So you can see where Onesimus goes back, they talk about that. Philemon says, no, I really need you here, and Paul needs you there. Where do you want to be, right? Because he's your brother, right? So where do you think? Are you doing good? He needs your help, but are you comfortable doing that? I know he needs you, and he might say, well, I really prefer to be here with you now that you're my brother. I think I owe you that for one reason I left. So there's that brotherly relationship, like Trey said, that there wasn't before. she didn't even know he's there. He comes back and says, "Oh, you're my brother, and I have this letter."
Right.
Because things aren't going to change overnight, just like we talked about earlier. You became a Christian. The relationship has now changed, but the inner working between you and whoever, they just don't snap like that. They're different. It takes a while to those things to work themselves out.
And I like the fact that he uses this approach with Philemon, which is a lesson for us that when we try to deal with issues, there's that, again, that first 7 verses was not just to butter up and, to get my own way, like I told you guys before, I think it was last week, if all of a sudden I just flower you with all kinds of compliments, the first thing's going to come to your mind is, what do you want, right, if you're not doing it. Paul always made it a point to do that in all his letters. You can go back and see the pattern that is there. So it wasn't just empty flattery that Paul was giving. He meant what he said and wanted Philemon, basically, if this is your character, and that's the cool thing whenever an issue comes up. If we're sitting there saying, are you a Christian? Sure am. Well, great, because now you're going to act like a Christian. We've got a situation and we want you to act this way. That's basically all it is. Now, if a person says, well, I'm a Christian, and you act in an ungodly way, well, wait a minute. We're going to have a problem here. We're going to have a serious problem.
Well, and as two individuals, you should know then how to expect that person to act. Whereas when you're dealing with somebody who's a non-Christian, you probably expect them to act, oppositely that way.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with a Christian, you know that, well, we've got this situation, and I know how Christians should be dealing with this, so I expect going into that, that's how we're going to deal with this.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. Is it right, not only for Paul, but for you and I, to expect our brothers and sisters to act a certain way?
Yes.
Is it right? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Not in an arrogant kind of way, because, in other words, if I'm expecting things out of you as a standard as a Christian, doesn't that come back to me? Yeah. They're like, well, Chuck, I expect you to act like a Christian in all of this too. Absolutely. And I think that really comes across here in this short letter. So he comes back and says, whom I wish to keep with me. I'm letting you know that up front. He's been he ministers to me with in my chains, and so we're getting to understand what he's going through. But again, verse 14, but without your consent, I wanted to do nothing. Okay, I don't want to do anything without your consent, that your good deed, that it comes back to you, Philemon, and we have to see this. You do good deeds, folks, as Christians. We do good deeds. We're not bragging on ourselves, okay? We're not earning our salvation, but I think if we belittle everything that we do and the things that we do, things whether behind the scenes, whether people know it or not, you're doing things for the Lord, right? I mean, are you supposed to do works? And will works save you? Will works save you? It's a trick question. Will work? What's that? Works. Yeah. Faith without works is dead, right? Faith without works is dead. So I can't earn my salvation, but I'm going to tell you this one. Without works, I'm not making it to heaven. And so the kind of works we're talking about are that which is approved by God, coupled with faith, doing it for the Lord. Okay. And again, that he wanted him to do it voluntarily. Now look at verse 15. He says, for perhaps he departed for a while for this purpose, that you might receive him forever, no longer as a slave, but more than a slave, a beloved brother, especially to me, but how much more to you, both in the flesh and in the Lord. All right. Wow. Okay, so Paul expands on this. And, guys, what's Paul doing when he says, perhaps he departed for this reason? What's Paul saying here? What's another way of saying it? Perhaps him departing from you in the big picture was a good thing. You sit there and say, well, can something good come out of something bad? Yes, it happens all the time. Can something, was it, did we ever think that Joseph's brothers were ever in the right, that Joseph ended up as a slave in Egypt? Did we ever think that Joseph's brothers were in the right? What they did was wrong, right? It was simple. There's nothing in the scriptures that says what they did was approved by God. Now, did something good come from that? Absolutely, something wonderful came from it. And Joseph even ended up telling them to his brothers. And so what we're saying here is, from the onset, what was Paul saying that it was good for him to run away from him? Was he approving of Onesimus running away? We've got to figure this out, folks. What was Paul saying? Look at verse 15. For perhaps he departed for a while for this purpose. Perhaps, in the providence of God allowing certain things to happen in circumstances. Perhaps you going through things for a reason. Misty.
It sounds to me like he's just saying, look, this is what happened. We can't go back and change that. Yeah. But we need to deal with it, and how are we going to handle it? And we kind of touched on it where we talk about his own free will, and Paul's not trying to force him. Paul's clearly stating what he would like for him to do, but it's obvious that there's other things that Philemon could do in the situation. And I think that's important for us to remember too, when we talk about respect and opinions, is just because I think it should be done this way, and I think this is the only way, that doesn't mean somebody else can't see another way to accomplish the same purpose.
That's right. And by Paul saying that perhaps this has all happened, for a good reason, as he mentions here. Perhaps he departed for a while for this purpose, by the way, that you might receive him forever. Philemon, you need to realize that something wonderful has come out of this. And I think sometimes we fail to see the good, right? Okay, guys, let's play the bad guy. Let's give Philemon a really bad attitude, okay? How could he be overreacting? What could Philemon? None of these words help Philemon. They're falling on deaf ears, because what possible, and I'm not even saying probable, what possible disposition could he take? Misty?
He can be very angry. Cost him a lot of money.
Yep, I'm angry. What else?
I'm going to fire you. Be good. You come back, you don't have a job anymore. You're my slave. I'm going to say to somebody else,
I don't want anything to do with you anymore. Dan?
Rejects Paul because of the association.
That's huge. That's huge, right? It's like, Paul, I used to look at you in this light. I don't look at you like that anymore. You didn't take my side in this. And I really wanted to see you to get mad at Onesimus. It's really hard for us to see that happening from a Christian standpoint, because when you hear somebody's become a Christian, your immediate reaction is what? Joy. You're rejoicing over that. And especially many of you, especially if you find a family member.
well, this has been written by Paul after the fact. So Paul knows the outcome. So the letter then from him, says, you're looking at things. Now that things have happened, this is the best outcome.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Prior to that, and even now, until Philemon gets this letter, you really don't know what he's thinking.
That's right. That's right. And that's why he's saying, he's letting him know, you guys, we got to keep that in mind as we're going verse by verse. But the big picture is Paul. This has already happened. Paul already has all the information, and Philemon's getting the letter, and Philemon's learning as he goes along here. Oh, right off the bat, Onesimus, and Onesimus came to you, and he was converted by you, and you're sending him back to me, and here's some things I want you to do, and how to receive him. But something is really good from this, because now that he's come back, verse 16, no longer as a slave, but more than a slave, a beloved brother, especially to me, but how much more to you, both in the flesh and in the spirit of the Lord. See, Paul says, you know what? This whole situation has been wonderful for me, but now it's even better for you. Now how? When you compare the two, Paul is getting a lot out of this with Onesimus being converted. How even more so, guys, for Philemon? How more so?
Just the influence he'll have on the other slaves and stuff like that. I mean, he'll be almost an advocate for Philemon to the other people as being a good servant. And
I like that.
you know,
Okay. That's good. What were you saying, Mister?
Philemon's got all the power. He's got the power to send him back. He's got the power to, expand his reach with the gospel even further by sending Onesimus back. It's his service. He's got that authority.
Exactly. Tim?
Well, I think it gives Philemon the opportunity to demonstrate his faith. But right now, we don't know what's going on. He's gone, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to deal with anything. He's gone. You don't know what he's saying to the congregation in Colossae, right? That's a different issue. But
Yeah.
all the other brethren, when he comes back, they know what happened to Philemon.
Yeah.
Here's Onesimus. Now he's our brother. We didn't have this issue before. Now we've got to deal with our emotions and our feelings, those kind of things. So there should be joy. Should over.
I mean, I love what all you guys are saying here, because what you guys are revealing is the potential for so much good to come out of this situation is enormous, isn't it? I mean, and I think that's what Paul's doing. He's painting a wonderful picture here of saying, okay, out of this bad situation, something really, really good happened, and even more things can happen that are good yet on the horizon. You can see how a bad attitude would just make matters worse. I mean, how terrible that would be, right? If Philemon didn't receive this letter properly and have the right attitude, and he does a 180, which is pretty hard for us to even imagine him doing that. Now, and moving on, look at verse 17. He says, "If then you count me as a partner, receive him as you would me." So what card is he playing now? Now earlier he was playing the card about, I'm an aged man, I'm in prison. Oh, sure, okay, I won't be mad. What card is he playing now?
Brother card.
Yeah, you got to play the brother, the fellow laborer. We're partners, right? We're partners. We're fellow laborers in the Lord, and we have that bond. We don't talk a lot about that, or we haven't talked a lot about that, but remember, Onesimus goes to Rome, and he runs into Paul, and Paul converts him. And I just can't imagine the conversation. Well, I know Philemon. I know him. Not just you guys have run into people and who know people that you know. But we're not talking about just strangers or acquaintances that you both know, but somebody that you know really well. And there was a bond there between Paul and Philemon. I think we have to keep that in mind as we're going through this, because I think that really helps when you have a strong relationship with others. Okay? That really goes a long way. And that's why brethren build bonds with one another. Because when you build bonds, something like this might come up. Obviously not literally like this, but something might come up and you're able to handle it, and you can play these cards. Sometimes I'll downplay a mistake I've made and apologize and say, just chalk it up to an old man, who's forgetful. I'll play that card. In all sincerity, play that card. I forget stuff, and I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking when I did that. And you're just trying to help them to be understanding. And Paul says, if you count me as a partner, which, well, I do, well, receive him as you would me. Is that too much to ask from somebody? Was that too much to ask? Sometimes people may ask too much from somebody. You're asking too much. Was that too much for Paul to ask? It would be too much for Paul to ask if what? It would be too much to ask if what? it would be too much to ask if,
Paul's opinion on something that was spiritually compelled.
okay, and if Onesimus, what he did wasn't that important, becoming a Christian, if what you've been doing in the past is not that important, it's important to maintain all of this, is the point that Paul is driving home. And so, verse 18, but if he has wronged you, now we were talking about the bad attitude, if Philemon took a bad attitude, right there, if Philemon's reading this letter and he's really burning, he's still angry over this, and nothing has settled him down yet, what happens to him when he gets to that verse? What does Philemon do?
He's ready for the next verse.
He's like, if he's done anything wrong, I could just, if I'm going to lose it, right? I'm not being godly in all of this. I'm just like, Paul, what do you mean if he's done something wrong? Of course he did something wrong. He left. That's wrong. Just forget everything that Paul has already talked about. You can just see where anger can get the best of us, right? It didn't here. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that that's what we have to learn from this, of the good that can come from things. Where was I here? Oh, yeah. So he goes, if he has wronged you or owes you anything, put that on my account. When somebody says something like that, what does that do to your mindset? I've got an opinion on that, but if somebody were to say that to me, what would your mindset be? What happens here when that is said to you? Put that to my account. How might you react?
I would think you almost makes you feel like you have to do that, because they're saying absolve him of whatever. Let me take I'll cover whatever. So then you think, well, I have to do this, otherwise I don't have a relationship with Paul.
Okay. So when somebody says something like that, are you more inclined to look at what you owe, what that person owes me? When a person says, just put it to my account, are you more inclined to increase or decrease? Why?
Because they're showing that compassion and you feel like you need to show people.
I agree with what Trey said, the decrease, because it shows how important it is to Paul and the value that he sees in the situation, that he's willing to say, it's kind of like he's saying, look, this is a big deal, this is important, I'll take the hit for this. That's how valuable it is to me and to the cause. And so it would cause Philemon to be like, well, okay, if it's that, if he feels that strongly about it, maybe this outweighs what I feel that I'm owed.
Exactly. I love it. Dan?
So it's sort of pointing out in this that as we're discussing this idea that someone is going to repay this, you have to call out that just because he was baptized, he still owes it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people lose sight of that.
Yeah.
He's got this earthly debt. He was baptized. He still needs to repay it. So it leads you to a good thought. If he still needs to repay earthly debt that he had from before his conversion, does he not also have to repay any spiritual debts to people that he owes from before his conversion? Namely, that he ran away and continually stole something. Even if Paul repays whatever the money is or whatever, doesn't Philemon, doesn't Onesimus rather owe a repentance toward Philemon as well as a part of this? Paul can't do that for him. Right. Is that point? So Philemon, there's still action owed on the part of Onesimus here, even if Paul pays the balance of Philemon. So don't worry about the debt itself.
And I'll be honest with you, when you're saying that, I'm thinking, if I'm Onesimus, I'm thinking, just coming back to you, it should speak volumes, right? That I ran away, but I come back, And also, when I'm thinking about this, what came to my mind, and I hope this doesn't backfire on me, this illustration, but if you're having a yard sale, okay, and you got all these prices on there, and one of the members shows up at your yard sale, what are you usually, and I put right on this, what are you inclined to do when they say, well, I'm thinking about buying this? What are you going to do?
Just take
You usually just give it to them, or, especially if it's expensive, you're not paying that much, right? You get this idea when Paul said, just put it to my account, which is a great way of saying, obviously, if somebody's going to, Chuck, I heard this guy did something, I'll take care of it. If Warren comes to me and his grandson ran into my car, and the bill is whatever, and Warren says, Chuck, look, it was a mistake, and I'll pay for it. What do I owe you? Don't worry about it. Right? Because when you've got a bond with somebody, right, you look at it a little differently, is the point. And that's what you guys were saying, all of this. And that's what Paul is getting across here. And then he went on to say, in verse 19, I, Paul, am writing with my own hand. I will repay, not to mention to you that you owe me even your own self besides. What card is he playing now? Yeah, I mean, really, when you look at this, you and Onesimus have something in common. I taught you both. Okay? And again, he's not being rude here, but you can just see what he was trying to get across. Yes, look, in verse, yes. I'll only have 5 minutes left. I can slow down a little bit. We're going to finish this chapter today. So, not to mention that you owe me even your own self besides. Now, was Paul saying you owe me? Was Paul saying you owe me? Was that his point here? You owe me. No, his point. No.
He's just reminding him that he also was in that same situation at the time.
Yeah, if you're going to talk about debt, if you're going to bring this up, we've got that also. And I think it's going to help Philemon to appreciate what we have. Guys, I think it helps us all to keep things in perspective, doesn't it?
Well, then Paul can also look back at one time he was in the same place as well, right? So, and the point that you made about it, Paul says, I'll pay it, and you say, no, you don't have to. Brother could say, okay, I'll let you pay it. Yeah. So you do pay it. You shouldn't say, well, I didn't think you really need that. Right. I mean, you want me to pay you?
Good point.
So you shouldn't feel like the brother's always going to discount. It doesn't have to.
Good point. I can't believe I let that slide. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because if you do come to my yard sale, and I don't want you getting in the car saying, can't believe you charged me full price for it. Now we got a rift between us, right? Yeah, you can just see how that could blow up. Okay, and so having said all that, he now gets to the point in verse 20. He says, yes, brother, let me have joy from you in the Lord. Refresh my heart in the Lord. Okay, there's another card being played here. What's Paul doing now? What card's he playing? I'm not old. Played that one earlier. I'm in prison. Played that one earlier. Dead. Played that one earlier. What's he playing now?
Read it as, come on, make my day. Make my heart.
That was it.
Joy.
It would just be overflowing. Did you hear that? When somebody says to me, if you do this to me, I am going to be indebted to you for the rest of my life. And you're like going, it's not that big of a deal. Have you ever done anything for anybody that really kind of made more of it than you think they should have? Anybody ever do anything for you? Where you kind of, you did something for somebody that they're making more out of it than you really think they should. And you're just like going, hey, it's not a big deal. But you want to know something? When they're making more of a big deal out of that, how does it make you feel?
Feel really good because they appreciate it.
And what might it motivate you to do? More. Well, do more. Yeah, That little thing. And you're going overboard with this gratitude and appreciation and how much it helped you. You're going on and on. I really that helped me spiritually. I'm a stronger man because of this, or a stronger woman because of this. Man, well, I'm glad I could do that for you. That's wonderful. That builds you up, and that's what, what Philemon's, I'm going to tell you, you read something like this, if Philemon takes the opposite approach, this guy's got some serious problems. But I can't see that happen because of the pattern that was there beforehand. That's what will test us, right, guys? Matt.
Well, I think also, for Philemon, it had to have been somewhat of a wake-up call because, Onesimus left for a reason. How Philemon was treating him, we don't really know. But to see, a slave that you had that went all the way to Rome before he heard the gospel, and then comes back and you find out all this has happened, and he's told, you need to treat him differently now. It's got to cause him to question, how was I treating him before? How am I treating, as a Christian, was I treating him poorly before, inappropriately before, and then whatever other slaves he may have, how is he treating them? And it could go one of two ways, like you said. He could either be getting angry with all of this, but it would also, I think it would kind of have to be a little bit of a, I don't want to say embarrassment, but kind of a wake-up call to be like, man, I should be doing more to those around me, because although he's a slave, he's still a human. Why didn't I teach him this? Why did he have to go all that way?
Right. Yeah, it could go. Yeah, man. It could go either way. I think knowing the background of Philemon, I think there might be more on Onesimus' shoulders. Because have you ever done anything? Put it this way: can you do all the right things and still have people hate you? With your illustration, that Philemon could have been angry by saying, I treated that kid like he was my own son, and he still left. I acted like a Christian, and he still left. It would be a test either way. Misty?
Well, in that situation, because I do think it's probably more likely on Onesimus' shoulders that he was
the bad guy? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You feel a sense of betrayal when that happens. You've done all the right things. You've done everything you could. You still are betrayed by this person leaving you. It could be a boss firing you. It could be an employee leaving you. And then they come back and they want you to treat them as if none of that had ever happened.
Yeah.
And that's hard to move past.
That really would be. Now?
I think that, from like a parenting standpoint, my mom could tell me something, but if like Trey tells me the exact same thing, sometimes it does come through better because it's something that you've heard all the time. So from a business standpoint, he could have just heard Philemon saying this all the time and just kind of like tune it out, like yeah. But then Paul comes and tells him, and it could be the exact same thing, but because it's a different source, and he's realizing, oh, this is like something I need to adhere to. Then it's on Philemon to realize it's not a personal against him; it's Onesimus just needed to hear it from a different source or something else.
Well, and that's the lesson for all of us here, guys. I mean, if we can't identify with what's going on here, we've really missed the boat on it. Let me get through this. Let me finish this. He says, having confidence in verse 21, in your obedience, I write to you, knowing that you will do even more than I say. Wow. You talk about another card. I don't even know why I'm writing this to you, Philemon, because you're going to go over and beyond, because I know your character. Now, it's like, if there's a guilt card being played, it's this one right here. Yikes, he's really expecting me to be taking the high road on this one. And okay, I won't let you down. That's what you want. I love it. It's something that we need to be mindful of. Verse 22, but meanwhile, also prepare a guest room for me, for I trust that through your prayers I shall be granted to you. And so Paul is now telling them, that he's anticipating this letter is going to be taken perfect. I mean, this letter will not put a rift between us. He's given them the benefit of the doubt. As a matter of fact, I'm going to come and I'm going to stay. The bad attitude guy would say what here? You're not staying here, buddy. I'm writing a letter back to him. Don't even think about showing up here. Well, that's not going to happen. And I just love what he does here. And then he closes out this by saying, Epaphras, my fellow prisoner in Christ Jesus. Fellow prisoner. Paul wasn't alone. when it comes to being incarcerated, and others were there too. But he sends greetings on behalf of him, as do Mark, Aristarchus, Demas, Luke, my fellow laborer. Now, if you guys remember, if you weren't here last week, guys, we talked about the different names that were, or different people that were mentioned here, and Demas was mentioned, and that kind of gave us an idea. Did Paul write Philemon before or after he wrote 2 Timothy? How do you know if he wrote it before? Because Demas had forsaken, right? Had forsaken him. And so in that time period there, now in the book of Colossians, not only here, but Demas has been a help to him and been there for Paul. So it just goes to show you, it's a warning for all of us that you can be faithful, you can be doing the right thing, and everything's going well. Don't think for a moment you couldn't turn your back on the Lord, because it did happen. And Luke, my fellow laborer, and he goes, all fellow laborers. Demas was a laborer. And you can be a laborer and I can be, but I can turn my back on the Lord. He says, and the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with your spirit. Amen. Wonderful thoughts that Paul presented here. If everything goes as planned, you can just picture what happens when he receives Onesimus back and the benefits of all that. Lord willing, someday we'll get to see him. So, hey man, I heard that story about you and Philemon. That was a great lesson for me. That helped me a lot. I don't know what it's going to be like, but anyways, I appreciate all your thoughts, guys. Now we'll get ready for worship.
Good evening.